SNAP benefits, food assistance, a smaller portion of this really more directly deals with the ag side of this. But how do you address his concerns that House Republicans are focused too much on limiting SNAP benefits?
Well, I'll address USDA Secretary Vilsack and his concern. Number one, what happened under COVID is he expanded the SNAP program by $30 billion. And he just simply did it via agency rule and say, hey, I can do this. And we look back and say, no, that's not correct. Anything that increases any dollars has to go through Congress. So we're putting the reins on the USDA secretary and saying, you just don't have the ability to arbitrarily raise dollars for this program. That's number one. Number two is that we believe when these SNAP dollars are given out that there should be some work requirements. And there are some basic requirements. And we're just looking at how we can better use taxpayer dollars and making sure that those that need the SNAP benefits, which are great, that they're also a backside and saying, all right, is there work requirements, or can we put in work requirements to be productive for these tax dollars?
So big picture, what is your feel? What do you want as you look at the nutrition, the SNAP side of this, the benefit side of this? How much smaller should the amount of money, the amount of tax dollars going into this, how much smaller should it be next year than where it is right now?
Well, it's a great question. And we're not asking for any cuts in the SNAP program. We're just asking for guardrails to be put on. Currently, every month there's about $30 billion of overspent dollars that we have to rein in, that people are taking it that should not be taking it. So what we're saying is, all right, we got to put guardrails on these tax dollars that are being spent and how they're being used, and make sure there's not abuses, and making sure that there are work requirements, and then finally making sure that agency can't just whimsically raise the dollar amount because they want to.
Sticking with agriculture here, some concerns about bird flu, this avian flu. It has spread into dairy cattle, started in Texas, and we now see the second confirmed case in humans. The first one was in Texas. The second one that just got reported this week is in Michigan. So as this is expanded beyond wild birds, of course, we've seen what it's done to our poultry. We've had layoffs at one of the bigger egg plants across the country because of how many birds they're going to have to put down. It's going to take a while to rebuild all of this. Is the USDA, is the federal government writ large here doing enough and have enough resources to protect against the spread of this thing?
Well, this is a real tragic event. I mean, in Iowa, we've lost over 60 million birds over the last year. I mean, think about that, 60 million birds. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that beef and dairy is safe. There's no problems there. But we have to continue to research and create the ability to understand what's happening to stop this avian bird flu that's continuing to spread, obviously, as you noted. Right? That's why we have the vet lab and the diagnostic lab at Iowa State University. Right? We got to continue to figure out solutions to this problem. It also comes down to having a vaccine bank. What can we do to promote and stop this avian flu from occurring each and every year? It's a massive cost to these producers on what's happening. And for Iowa, we're the #1 egg producer in the country, and we got to make sure we protect that and protect our producers.
The Iowa Agriculture Secretary, Mike Naig, told me that he has some concerns about folks who drink raw milk. The early studies on this shows that the pasteurization process almost eliminates any risk in there from just in case that dairy cow had been infected by the bird flu. When you're drinking it raw, then you don't have that additional process. Do you have any concerns about raw milk consumption?
No, I don't. I mean, obviously, what most of us drink is pasteurized milk, and that's very important. I mean, what you get in the supermarket is pasteurized milk. That's very safe, just like the meat is very safe. The last thing we need to do is start scaring consumers, and that's what we don't want to do. This is all very safe, and you know, again, it goes back to our producers. They're doing everything they can to make sure that this is not getting into the system. They're doing a lot of security protections to make sure that the avian bird flu doesn't go into dairy cattle in Iowa. So I'm really excited about what our Iowa producers are doing and creating success in this front.
The 4th Congressional District, obviously a top ethanol producer, so questions about the future of ethanol. It looks like E15 can finally be sold year-round, at least in that small group of states, 7, 8 states, whatever that number is. What's next for ethanol? Will there be some kind of expansion when it comes to fuel?
Well, if you think about ethanol, and by the way, the 4th District is the largest biofuels district in the country. I think you can put them all together and it still doesn't equal what the 4th District does. We have 44 ethanol plants and 12 biodiesel plants. In Iowa, every other corn and soybean row goes to either ethanol or biodiesel, so it's very significant. But what it does for the consumer, it lowers the price of gas. And also what it does is creates an opportunity to continue to have liquid fuels. The Biden administration and Energy Secretary Granholm says by 2032, they demand that 62% of the cars on the road and light trucks become electric, right? That's not an alternative. We don't have the grid to do it, nor do consumers want that type of car. So liquid fuels that use biofuels are the answer. And that's why we have to continue to expand and continue to grow. And also there's a great opportunity now for aviation fuel to be used, and not only aviation, but in trucks and ships and all this stuff. There's a massive opportunity here that we have, and we want to capture it.
Okay, a question about what about that GREET model? So that directly gets into this sustainable aviation flu. There are some differences of opinion, perhaps, about where we're headed with this. Will this properly allow the expansion of sustainable aviation fuel, or does something have to be adjusted here?
Well, the GREET model, what it does is addresses what the producer is doing, how they're creating conservation, how they're doing cover crops, how they're doing tariffs and terraces and all these other things, right? So the GREET model takes that into consideration when they're looking at the final score of what ethanol can produce. And that's why it's so important that we continue to have the GREET model. It helps the producers, and then it helps also ethanol and biodiesel. So this is very significant. And then as you go on to aviation fuels, sustainable aviation fuels, this is a key part of it, of showing how it is a lot better than regular aviation and ethanol or other gas products that are being used.
So how do you look at this, the fiscal side of this? And we have, as you might guess, a ton of questions about relate to money. But when it comes to something like this, sustainable aviation fuel, from the onset here, you know, it's a tougher price point, right? It's going to take some subsidies to make this work before it could eventually really get going here, and perhaps then it won't require those subsidies in the future. So how do you, as a fiscal conservative, strike that balance on whether there should be some taxpayer support with credits, however you want to phrase it, for that industry to expand?
Well, again, being a business guy from the past, I look at return on investment. All right, we have to look at return on investment. All right, so as taxpayers, are we going to invest dollars, and what are we going to get at the end of it? What does that economic engine look like for the 4th District and for Iowa? And we've seen this with our ethanol plants and biodiesel plants, of all the jobs and what it's doing for our main streets, what it's doing for our hospitals and our schools. And with sustainable aviation fuel, it's virtually the same thing, that we could almost double, triple the capacity of what these ethanol and biodiesel plants are doing. So that's really significant, and that's why I'm bullish on it. Simply saying that return on investment for Iowa could be extremely, extremely important, and it could really set our producers and our farmers up for a great future.
We're going to try to be mindful of the time here, since I know you have to get to the House Ag Committee too. Let's try to go about 10 more minutes here. So let's jump into a mess of money questions, as you might guess here. We've seen some record highs in the financial markets. Now they've backed off some as the Fed has expressed some concerns here this week in those minutes from the Open Market Committee that have now gone public about that. The possibility of maybe raising interest rates may have to be on the table here since inflation is not fallen as fast as they want here. But one of the questions we have here is when Donald Trump was president, he would often measure the strength of the economy by touting the stock market numbers here. Why not do the same for the current president in light of the fact that these various industries have had record highs this year?
Well, I think it all, you have to look at multiple factors, right? Especially in the financial markets. Yes, our stock market is booming right now, but you also have to look at what's happening with inflation. And that's why when you had the Fed a year and a half ago said this is transitory, we don't have to worry about it, and then we kept raising interest rates. Well, how does this affect the family? How does it affect small business and the farmer? Well, all of a sudden your cost of gas, your cost of utilities, your cost of health care, cost of food is all going up 25 to 35%, right? This creates hardship for these areas, for the families, for the producers, and for small businesses. And that's what we have to look at. And also, you look at new home starts that are also slowing dramatically because of the high interest rate and the cost of inflation of buying the inputs to put up a new home. I mean, these are all direct costs that we need to look at that's affecting our economy. You can look at one thing, but to me, you've got to look at all the pieces together and say, all right, what's truly happening in our economy? And I know right now a lot of families are hurting because they're getting that paycheck and they can't afford buying the groceries or the gas or that utility bill.
In the end, doesn't the Fed get some credit in while inflation hasn't fallen back as fast as they would have hoped? By raising rates, they have, by all accounts, avoided a recession. Don't want to jinx us here, but we've avoided a recession. So on that aspect, didn't they achieve what they were trying to do?
Well, I look at the Fed and say they've been always 6 months behind the game, behind the ball. And that's why we're continuing to chase inflation. If they were proactive early on and not saying it's transitory, we wouldn't have had these problems. And that's why I get a little upset by the Fed. You know, a year and a half ago, they had the opportunity to do some pretty significant things, and they didn't, and that's what's causing the problems today. And I have addressed this with Janet Yellen. I sit on Ways and Means. She's been in front of our committee several times. And she apologizes, simply saying, yeah, we thought we could stop it early on, and that didn't happen. We didn't think it would go on as long as it has, and it has. But what has happened is this is all because of the reckless spending of the Biden administration. When you throw this much cash into the system, right, you're going to have inflation. We all know that. And yet they're not stopping. We just saw Biden's budget, $7.3 trillion. That's $2.3 trillion above a balanced budget. That's ridiculous.
All right, I'm going to try to rapid fire you here because I know we're coming up against the clock so you can get out to that committee. Question about how best can you help seniors with the high cost of food, medicine, and housing?
Yeah, the bottom line there is that we got to stop spending, right? We've got to get our budget under control. We've got to get to a balanced budget, right? If we can stop inflation, that will help everybody. That is the key. Start lowering interest rates. This all helps our seniors, especially when they're living, on that CD and they're living paycheck to paycheck. When those pharmaceuticals are going up, I mean, and their Part D or their pharmaceutical insurance is going up. That's very significant, and that stops if we can stop this crazy spending.
Okay, I'm going to hit you. You can't do yes, no, probably, but let's see if we can bounce through a couple of these here. as quickly as we can here. Election 2020, stolen or not stolen?
Well, we see who the president is. So the president is Joe Biden, and we see that we don't have he doesn't shut the border. We have runaway inflation. We have reckless spending. He is our president.
Legalize marijuana federally.
I leave it up to the states. Each state has to decide. I think there's cautionary tales that we have to look at Seattle, and we have to look at Denver and other cities and states that have gone down this path.
Budget, when you talk about budget cuts, how much smaller does the budget need to be? Percentage-wise,
the bottom line is we've got to get to a balanced budget. We've got to get to a balanced budget. And I have a balanced budget amendment. I have a balanced budget bill to just do this. And I just wish they would enact it because it's very important.
All right, we'll make this the last one here. Congress is about as unpopular as any other group you measure according to these polls. You're going for a third term. Talk to the people who are frustrated with how D.C. works. Why should they not just eject any incumbents and bring in a rookie to try to get some fresh faces in there?
The bottom line is we've got problems, but we also have to have solutions. So somebody can yell and scream all they want, but you've got to bring to the table solutions. And that's what I've done the last 3 years, is deliver results for the 4th District, to deliver results for our families, for our businesses, and for our agricultural producers. That's my passion. I've been born and raised and lived all my life in Iowa. I have 4 children. I've been married to my wife 31 years. I know the 4th District better than anyone, and I'm there to make sure that I deliver results for them.
Congressman, I know you need to hustle off to the Ag Committee. We appreciate the time this morning.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks for having me on.
Congressman Randy Feenstra seeking re-election in Iowa's 4th Congressional District. When you look at the map, this has become kind of the biggest one because of the way our population works. So it's roughly a third of our state is in this 4th Congressional District. In the days ahead, we will continue these conversations. We will set up a time to talk to the congressman's Republican challenger and also look at some of the other key races across our state. Thanks for joining us this morning.